Summary statistics. Let's start by discussing the summation notation. First off, let's talk about the notation x sub I. So what is x sub I, where I is 1, 2, 3, all the way to n? So the notation x sub I, where I is 1, 2, 3, all the way to n, is just the value of the variable x for the first, second, third, all the way to nth observation. So let's think about an example. Suppose I have a sample of 30 people. And I label them 1, 2, 3, all the way to 30. Let x be the variable height. Then if the person I label 1, so if person 1 is 67 inches tall, then x sub 1 is equal to 67. If person 2 is 65 inches tall, then x2 is 65, and so on and so forth. In other words, x sub I is just the value of the ith observation in the dataset. So with that in mind, let's define the summation notation. So we have the following definition. The summation of xi for I going from 1 to n is equal to x sub 1 plus x sub 2 plus x sub 3 plus all the way to x sub n. We read this left-hand side as the summation of x sub I for I going from 1 to n. Basically, the idea is wherever you see an I, you want to replace it with 1, 2, 3, all the way to whatever n is, and then you sum all those numbers up. So the first term on the right hand side is what you get when I is equal to 1. The second term is what you get when I is equal to 2. The third term is what you get when I is equal to 3, and so on and so forth. And the last term is what you get when I is equal to n. So that definition leads us to some basic results that we will use in this course. So results. The first result is that the summation of xi times yi for I going from 1 to n is equal to x1 times y1 plus x2 times y2 plus all the way to xn times yn. Again, it's the same idea, right? Wherever you see an I, you want to replace it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to n. So the first term on the right hand side is what you get when I is 1, the second term is what you get when I is 2, and the last term is what you get when I is equal to n. So let's look at a particular example. Suppose that x1 is equal to 2, x2 is equal to 1, x3 is equal to 3, and then x4 is equal to 5. And then y1 is negative 1, y2 is 2, y3 is 1, and then y4 is negative 2. Then the summation of xi times yi for I going from 1 to 4 is equal to x1 times y1 plus x2 times y2 plus x3 times y3 plus x4 times y4. So if you plug in numbers from above, you have 2 times negative 1 plus 1 times 2 plus 3 times 1 plus 5 times negative 2. So 2 times negative 1 gives you negative 2, 1 times 2 gives you 2, 3 times 1 gives you 3, and then 5 times negative 2 gives you negative 10. So if you do the math here, you get negative 7 as the answer. Now there's one important note that I want to make, which is that the summation of xi times yi for I going from 1 to n is not the same as the summation of xi for I going from 1 to n times the summation of yi for I going from 1 to n. In other words, the summation of the product is not the same as the product of the summations. In order to calculate the left hand side here, you need to use this formula. So that is our first basic result. Let's look at the second basic result that we are interested in this course. Let A and B be any constants. Then the summation of xi minus a to the b power for I going from 1 to n is just going to be equal to x1 minus a to the b power plus x2 minus a to the b power plus all the way to xn minus a to the b power. Right, the first term here is what you get when I is equal to 1. The second term is what you get when I is equal to 2, and so on and so forth. And the last term is what you get when I is equal to n. So let's look at an example. Suppose I have x1 equals 3, x2 equals negative 2, x3 equals 1, and then x4 equals 4. And then suppose I have two constants, a equals 1 and b equals 2. Then the summation of xi minus 1 all square for I going from 1 to 4 is going to be equal to x1 minus 1 all square plus x2 minus 1 all square plus x3 minus 1 all square plus x4 minus 1 all square. So you plug in numbers. This is 3 minus 1 all square plus negative 2 minus 1 all square plus 1 minus 1 all square plus 4 minus 1 all square. So 3 minus 1 all square is 2 square. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. So this second term becomes negative 3 all square. 1 minus 1 is 0. So this is 0 square. And then 4 minus 1 is 3. So this is 3 square. So if you do the math here, you're going to have 2 square is 4. Negative 3 square is 9. Because negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. Right? 0 square is 0. And then 3 square is 9. So if you work this out, you get 22 as the answer. Now the last basic result I want to talk about is the following. Again, let a and b be any constants. Okay. Then we have the summation of xi minus a times yi minus b for I going from 1 to n. It's going to be equal to x1 minus a times y1 minus b plus x2 minus a times y2 minus b plus all the way to xn minus a times yn minus b. The first term here is what you get when I is equal to 1. The second term is what you get when I is equal to 2, and so on and so forth, right? And then the last term here is what you get when I is equal to n. So again, let's look at a specific example. Suppose that x1 is equal to 6, x2 is equal to 1, and then x3 is equal to 2. Then suppose y1 is 8, y2 is 3, and then y3 is 1. And let's say that suppose that a is equal to 3 and b is equal to 4. So the summation for I going from 1 to 3 of xi minus 3 times yi minus 4 is going to be equal to x1 minus 3 times y1 minus 4 plus x2 minus 3 times y2 minus 4 plus x3 minus 3 times y3 minus 4. So if you plug in numbers, right, this becomes 6 minus 3 times 8 minus 4 plus 1 minus 3 times 3 minus 4 plus 2 minus 3 times 1 minus 4. So 6 minus 3 is 3, 8 minus 4 is 4, so the first term is 3 times 4. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 3 minus 4 is negative 1, so the second term is equal to negative 2 times negative 1. Right? And then the last term, 2 minus 3 is negative 1 times 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Right? So the last term is negative 1 times negative 3. This is straightforward, right? The first term, 3 times 4 is 12. The second term, negative 2 times negative 1 becomes 2. Right? And the last term, negative 1 times negative 3 becomes 3. Okay? So you end up with 17 as the answer. So in this video, we define the summation notation, right? And then we also define the meaning of the notation x of I, right? So x of I is just the value of the variable x for the ith observation. And then we went through 3 important results that we will need in order to understand the material in this course.